In West Africa, the violence in Ivory Coast is rapidly increasing as the political crisis there gets worse every day. Thousands of residents are being displaced daily, and on Thursday, at least 25 people were killed by mortars fired into a city market by government troops. Correspondent Scott Stearns has the story.
The United Nations says violence in Ivory Coast has sent more than 75,000 refugees across the border into Liberia and displaced another 45,000 civilians in western provinces, where rebels backing former Prime Minister Alassane Ouattara are fighting government troops loyal to incumbent President Laurent Gbagbo. With more than 300,000 people displaced in the commercial capital Abidjan, the humanitarian coordinator for UN operations in Ivory Coast, Ndolamb Ngokwey, says the situation is deteriorating rapidly.
The humanitarian crisis in Cote d'Ivoire is very serious, and it is getting worse. It is getting worse if you consider, for example, that from December to now, we have about a tenfold increase in the number of displaced people.
Ngokwey says UN agencies need more money to cope with the growing number of refugees and internally displaced civilians.
With the increased violence the last 10 days, we are beginning to see more challenges in terms of having access to those vulnerable population. And also we are facing a new challenge, which is that the social infrastructure, which was supposed to respond to the humanitarian crisis.
The first wave of Ivorian refugees are living with Liberian families, but the new arrivals are too many for local communities to absorb. Mustafa Soumare is the UN humanitarian coordinator for Liberia.
Last week only, in 3 days, we got more than 40,000 refugees that has come because of the war close to the border. And that has changed completely our approach, because it's not anymore contingency. We have to actually have a kind of response to that. And that's why now we are on the second really flash appeal, so that we can really get the resources to support that.
Without a solution to the political crisis, Ngokwey says the humanitarian crisis will only grow worse.
We really hope that the international community, in face of the suffering of the women and children of Cote d'Ivoire, will be able to provide the needed assistance to those people, while at other levels the political issues is being discussed.
Ivory Coast's political issues have been discussed by a host of mediators, most recently African Union heads of state, who last week endorsed Mr. Ouattara as the country's duly elected president. Mr. Ouattara is now offering Mr. Gbagbo a national unity government, a Truth and Reconciliation Commission, and a unified armed forces in what he calls the incumbent president's last chance to resolve the crisis peacefully. Mr. Gbagbo is expected to make a nationwide address Friday, giving his response to calls that he step down. Scott Stearns, VOA News, Dakar.